Hello, everybody. It's John Pollock and Ting, and this is our Forbidden Door review. Monday at noon. I'm going to speak for Wei because I think I feel the same way. I feel as though we sprinted into a wall, and that is where we are today. How are you, Wei?
Sprinted into a wall, and
that's what I feel like right now.
Okay.
I'm exhausted. I am absolutely exhausted. I went to sleep around 4:30, and I don't know when I woke up.
Yeah. I feel similar. Last night, trying to do these shows after going to the event would have been. It's just really hard. Like, it's really, really difficult. So,
Wei is the ultimate professional, folks. As him and I were in an Uber at 3 a.m, whatever time it was, and Wei's, should we record something real quick just to put up? And God bless the man, but I was just like, Wei, I'm tapped, dude. I think the folks can wait till noon. And Wei was like, you're right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, like thinking about it, like we have all these ideas. Usually, like we go on right afterwards. Even like when we're in Montreal, for instance, it's just like record right after, right? But I guess sometimes you can just step back and realize it's not the end of the world if we're not in people's inboxes in the morning. So we're going to be in there 12 o'clock.
Did you want to quickly just touch a little bit upon the pre-Forbidden Door festivities that went down at Real Sports? First of all, a shout out to all of the people that showed up, and man, to Braden and Davey, who I love these two guys. They are the best, and really, with all due respect, a lot of the planning for this was Davey, Braden, and Wei, who just went above and beyond. I really felt like a passenger for this whole thing. So you guys, I was blown away by everything. Like, it looked like such a professional setup, and everyone seemed to have such a great time. And I love doing these shows. I love doing the live shows. I think this was our most successful one that we have done, just in terms of numbers and the after party component, which unfortunately AEW had other plans, so I could not make it to the after party as we had a press conference that went till about 2:30 in the morning. But nonetheless, I did get to catch up with you guys for the after party on the street.
The after party, right? Yes. I don't think I could have been happier with the way things turned out, and maybe I speak for the Poisonrana boys as well. But it was awesome, man. Like, we sold out. We had to turn people away, unfortunately, at the door, just simply due to the capacity of that particular room that we booked. Had a wonderful turnout. Like, it was just honestly amazing to be able to have everybody that we know within sort of like our virtual circle in the same physical place. So many people that are either regulars on our shows or like just regularly interact with people in the community made it over to Toronto for this particular thing, and to be able to hold an event that gave a lot of people excuses to convene in the same place was awesome. Really, really awesome. I had several people come up to me saying that, hey, like, this card, it looks great, but I wouldn't necessarily have pulled the trigger unless you guys were doing something like this, because a lot of people are coming in not necessarily knowing other wrestling fans, and a lot of people just wanted probably appreciated the extra incentive to be able to go to an event and also do something like this before and after the event. Wrestling karaoke was awesome. Like,
what were some of the selections?
So they got this guy Hot Breath, who does
Hot Breath.
Yeah, he was the MC, like the guy who was running the karaoke, and he did a fantastic job. He had this like streamer with like toilet paper, like streamers basically, that he would put out if somebody did a really great job. But like, they managed to find wrestling like it's not just YouTube videos. Even though I think some of these might, anyway, they were like lyric videos with like, for Judas, and for like, certainly like a highlight for me was hearing Eric Marcotte do Batista's theme song.
I Walk Alone.
Yeah. I put a small video up on our Instagram.
What a weekend for Eric Marcotte. I mean, he had his Sonata encounter. He was
and all of these things he never signed up for. It's people signing him up for this stuff. Dickie Bird signed up Eric for the Sonata meet and greet that Eric didn't know about. Ended up getting trapped in the Air Canada Center for like 3 hours.
Yeah, the Scotiabank Arena kidnapped Eric Marcotte and Brandon from New Jersey. They were stuck in there, and then went through the tapings on Saturday night.
Yeah. And then this Batista's thing, somebody signed him up for. But as always, Eric puts his full heart into it, whether it's beating Sonata or sing Batista's theme song. He did great. John Cena did John Cena's theme song. Anyway,
did you get up there?
I did not get up there.
No,
I had boys to protect. Okay, and I don't know for today, but honestly, it was so much fun. They did so well with the games, and a lot of people had some really great questions for our Q&A. And the staff at Real Sports were, some of the most professional that we've been able to work with for something like this.
Yeah, I was pretty amazed when I walked in there and like all the graphics that they had up. Like this looked like such a professional setup that we had. The location was phenomenal. I still couldn't believe that we landed this location. Like for those in Toronto, they will be familiar like with Real Sports. Like this is the big stadium bar that is owned by Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, and it is like no word of a lie. Like it is a stone's throw across the street from the Scotiabank Arena. We could not have a closer location, and we thought this would be a great opportunity, not just to host all of our friends and listeners, but hopefully, pick up, some new people that might just stumble upon I Walk Alone on the karaoke screen and come into the Poisonrana post wrestling universe. So I only got to be there for the Q&A portion, but man, we got some great questions. Everyone seemed to have a really good time. I always enjoy those shows. I love doing them and getting to meet all of the listeners. First time we got to meet our man Neil, and that was a highlight for me this weekend, was just getting to meet him, hang out with him for a bit. It was odd. It was as though it was like I have not met him, but it really did not feel like that. You know what I mean? But yeah, so many people were up here, new people, old listeners, like all gamuts of listenership over the years.
Yeah. I now often have experiences where like I meet people in real life for the first time that I've been speaking to sometimes for years online, and almost in all cases you just kind of pick right up from like where you were online. Like it feels like I already know these people pretty well. The one thing I'm not prepared for are people's heights, and that never translates. Well, yeah, like
how tall they are. Yeah, I mean, exactly. Bruce Lord is a giant. I mean, we
have a lot of tall listeners. Okay, I was standing in a circle with like Bruce Lord, I think Robert Pearson, Jesse from the Six, Neil. I'm taking like a selfie photos, and I look like a hobbit next to these guys. We have some tall people podcasting.
Yeah, I've never thought of the height situation, but I guess you're right. When you think about it like that, I'm used to being the taller one, but I guess I just kind of just blend into the background. So anyway, that was a big thank you to everyone that came out, that traveled and went to the shows, came to the after party. We thank you very much. Brain and Davey are doing another one of these events over All In weekend, the day
All In It.
Yeah, All In It. They have already sold out. They're the Trinity Bar, I believe, is the location. So they don't need any more promotion for that show, but that should be a lot of fun. If I can honestly say, if I was not a part of this, I would attend one of these. They are the party hosts. They are just in their element as the MCs.
Yeah, I'm sure plenty more in their future as
the hosts of Way's wedding. Like what better endorsement could you have than Way enlisting those two on the biggest day of his life?
Yeah, no wrestling karaoke at my wedding, although maybe my next wedding.
What are you saying, Way? I think you're one and done. All right. Well, we do have Forbidden Door to get into. My grand plan was, I always just assume that there will be all this extra time. I was gonna hopefully watch a portion of this show this morning, but surprise, surprise, I have not seen any of the show beyond the live experience of it. So that's where I'm going to be coming at it from. As a note taker, of which I got comments, including from Pat LaPrade, very old school Pollock with the pen and paper. It's very hard in an AEW setting, especially, to be jotting down notes and looking up and looking down. So don't be the guy. surprised you missed the sunset flip spot. Surprised. Don't be that guy.
You don't be that guy. Nobody really likes that guy. But we do appreciate, corrections if we do miss something big. So chat room is open. Thank you all who are making the time at 12 p.m. Eastern time in the YouTube. But I have so much respect for you handwriting notes for AEW. I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Well, I am now officially investing in a portable charger that I can have, because that has been the bane of my existence. Actually, this maybe I'll save it for another time. I had a hell of a weekend. It's long story short, I was in a bit of a car wreck on Friday night. I was at a red light and got smoked from behind, and I'm okay. That is the good news, depending on your opinion of me. And anyway, so that was my Friday night. Was the car accident was one thing. It was waiting afterwards for the officers to arrive to give my statement, of which this car accident occurred at about 10:40 p.m. The cop arrived at just after 4 a.m. and I walked through my door at 5 a.m. on Saturday morning. And it was just an ungodly experience where, as I had 1% battery left on my phone, I am texting with the man on the screen, Ting, who at 1 a.m, so this is hours before I knew I would be freed, is offering to come in the middle of the night to come pick me up, like a true friend that I just could not subject to my agony and drag him down as well. But a public thank you, Way.
Oh, please. No, I've been there, not that late, thankfully, but at that point, like where you don't have a car, yeah. And those are my regular hours anyway, so you weren't really interrupting. I'm just so sorry.
I got into a car accident at a convenient time for you, is what you're saying.
I guess so.
If it was like 10 a.m, I was like, F off, Pollock, I'm tired.
Call an Uber. First of all, I was horrified to hear that. I know how it's great that obviously you're physically okay. It doesn't sound like anybody else in the accident. Well, anyway, you don't have to talk about that. But I felt terrible that you had a shitty night to what sounded like an incredible experience going to see MJ, a show that you were really looking forward to.
So I'm just going to get into it now. Okay, we'll get into Forbidden Door. So on Friday, all week I was debating. This was at Downsview Park in Toronto. I've never attended a concert at Downsview Park. So I'm debating all week. I'm like, do I just take the subway to this show or do I just drive? And it was going to be raining on top of it. I'm like, great, this is an outdoor show. At the end, I'm just like, I'm just going to drive because it's going to be easier. So I'm going through traffic on Friday. It's normal everyday traffic on a Friday. I leave my house at around 5:15. The concert, the first set is 6:45. I get to Shepherd West, which is you're taking Keel up to Shepherd West and then making a right. And it's 500 meters on Shepherd West to Downsview Park, the entrance. So it is about 6:10 p.m. that I pull up to Shepherd West. I am 500 meters away from the entrance and I turn gridlock as everyone is trying to get into this concert. I was like, okay, whatever. It's going to be a crawl into this entrance. And suddenly it's 6:20 and it's 6:30. I'm like, oh man, we're getting close to showtime here. We are not moving. And I can tell you folks that this 500 meters resulted in 2 hours. And I missed MJ.
What?
I missed MJ, who was on first. And thus, if there is another MVP in this, my buddy inside Ziggy videos me on WhatsApp, and I watched MJ's set on my phone on my dashboard. I was hoping, I was like, they've got to be starting late. There's no way. MJ's on promptly at 6:45 to start. And dude, I don't make it into it's 2 hours in this gridlock to the point I'm debating if I'm going to go to this concert. Like it's pouring rain. I'm waiting to probably get gouged for parking. Anyway, I get in and the concert turns out I got there for the 2.5 hours. I got in there to enjoy the back half of it. And then me on my way home, I'm like, yeah, you know what? This night turned out okay in the end. I missed MJ, but hey, it was fun. And then thus I get to a red light and boom, my night goes back to hell. But anyway, that was Friday night for me.
I'm shocked, dude. Like after
I saved that part because it didn't seem like the worst tragedy after what I had told you about my overall night. But
I'm like, okay, yeah, like he totaled the car, but at least he got to see MJ, and that's not even the case.
She sounded great on my phone though. It was like dude, my buddy literally, it's pouring rain and he's holding the phone up for 30 minutes. Like my friend Ziggy it was very kind of him because he knew how much I wanted to see. That was the whole reason I was going to this show.
I imagine that's part of the reason why he was there too, right? Unless he was also a big MJ or Stevie B or LaBouche fan.
Well, dude, the people who came, they were there to see Joey, who is a Toronto superstar, at least was in the day. And they had a hard out apparently at 11 p.m. and Stevie B had to still go on. So Joey's playing his set and then suddenly the lights go out and you see him throw the mic down and he leaves and everyone's chanting Angel because that's Joey's big song that he doesn't get to play and they have to go on the loudspeaker. You think he's getting the big encore? No, they're like, we have a time limit and we have to get to Stevie B. So that was the end of Joey and this crowd was not happy with the end of Joey. They wanted Angel and man, they did not get one.
Yeah, I just imagine the furious, battle in the back between Joey and Stevie B.
Oh, this was,
over Angel.
Yeah, dude, I bet you Joey would have had some Mindy's afterwards if he was speaking to the press afterwards. He was not happy about this turn of events. All right, I think this is the longest we can go on a Forbidden Door review without talking about Forbidden Door. So, with all due respect, we should probably move on to that. Did you have a good weekend?
Otherwise, I had a great weekend, John.
That's great. That's great.
I didn't drive.
That's the moral of the story. Never drive. That was my Achilles on Friday.
Yeah.
Opting to drive. Should have taken the subway. Okay, Forbidden Door from the sold out Scotiabank Arena. They announced a gate of $1.2 million, which Tony Khan had stated is their new record, which would make it slightly above Double or Nothing, which Brandon Thurston also had some numbers, but I guess how they arrive at these like this, it would technically be their record. It's kind of a moot point because they're going to shatter their record in 2 months' time when the Wembley Stadium. I mean, they already have shattered the record. That is the real gate record for the company for August 27th. But sold out crowd. Neither of us went to Collision on Saturday, and it looked like they did get over 6,000 tickets distributed. And I think you can look at that as a combination of Punk moving tickets, and they did also reduce prices of some tickets. So I think the combination, you at least got a healthy, even though half crowd in Toronto on Saturday night.
Yeah, when we're strictly talking, numbers in the building. Yeah, I mean, certainly it sounded great by the time, it got on air. And I think at that point, not only, of course, you want to be profitable, but you also want to present a good on-air product. And on air, it certainly looked it. Hamilton for Collision next week is probably still going to be a bit of a challenge to make look good.
They lost one of the matches just several hours before the show when Adam Cole, they just listed an illness. It turns out he showed up, he had a fever, and they were concerned enough. They didn't want other people to get sick as well, so they pulled the match with Adam Cole and Tom Lawler, but it just sounds like he might have the flu. This does not sound like anything too serious, and for all we know, he could be on TV Wednesday. So it doesn't sound like it's anything too concerning, but it was enough that they did pull it. Very unfortunate for Tom Lawler, as this was, you could argue, the biggest, I would say the biggest singles match when you consider the platform that he had. I didn't think this was probably going to be a long match. It would probably be one of the shorter ones on the show to get a solid win for Adam Cole, but it was a showcase for Tom Lawler, who did get, technically on the show in a dark match with Serpentico that the live crowd got to see. I don't think this aired on Fight or anything. 4 minutes and 13 seconds with Lawler getting the win. And hopefully with Lawler, he gets an invite back. There's no reason you couldn't do Cole and Lawler on TV one of these weeks. So unfortunate for Tom Lawler because this was a big match for his career.
Yeah, I mean, I was certainly disappointed. I didn't even know the match was taking place that early, so I unfortunately wasn't able to see the
No, this was before
Serpentico match.
7, so I don't think this aired in any capacity other than for the live crowd.
But I heard a lot of disappointment for this match being off this card. Obviously for Adam Cole, but I think as much for Adam Cole, Tom Lawler, and a lot of people, recognizing that this guy has been working really hard and is deserving of a shot on a big stage. So I imagine Tony Khan would book him again for either Dynamite or Collision.
Yeah, and you would think like he could be a part for a Ring of Honor at the very least that would fit in pretty seamlessly there. And you also had Royce Isaacs part of the angle on Saturday setting up the match. Tony Khan came out. There was a big pop for him, and then we got it was interesting during the 0 hour when the rundown came up, like you knew exactly it was going to be a replication, even and more so for CM Punk, because he was booed every time his image was showing, and that definitely extended to the match. So we'll quickly go through the results of the 0 hour. We had the Best Friends, Rocky Romero and El Desperado against the Mogul Embassy, and this one, it featured a lot of big spots, getting the audience into it. Desperado was very popular. Cage missed a discus lariat, hitting Swerve, and then they worked together with a assisted F5 onto Rocky Romero, and Swerve pinning him with the Swerve Stomp. And this one went 12 minutes and 33 seconds to open the show. Good reaction, and Trent Beretta as well looked very good in this, hit a moonsault to the floor, but Swerve gets the victory here after losing to Tanahashi the night prior, which was, a match that you and Kate went over, and we will talk about Tanahashi later.
Yes, we will. Yeah. Good action. Good presentation. Swerve comes out looking, as always, like a star when he's backed up by 3 giant dudes. They actually changed this because on the I believe the night prior they announced this as a 6-man with Roppongi Vice and Desperado versus the Mogul affiliates minus Brian Cage. So they just decided to add Chucky T and Brian Cage in there.
Yeah, unfortunately, no Rick Ross on the shows this weekend.
Who was very close in town. I wonder if they went on a nice coffee date. Rick Ross and Swerve.
I mean, at the very least, if the cameras were rolling, you never need an excuse to get the big boss Rick Ross on AEW program.
Promoted by the same promoters as the Joey
LaBouche
show.
Someone booked MJ and Rick Ross, knowing the demographic right here.
Not on the same show, but at the same place and 2 nights in a row.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. The Saturday show was wild. Like, I didn't go to this one, but you had Nelly, Neo, Rick Ross. Ja Rule, like
Pat Joe, I think.
Oh yeah, this was like 2003 coming at you really hard. So anyway,
yours was about 10 decades earlier, and then the Nelly was maybe.
I'll tell you, I thought Friday was pretty niche, but dude, it was packed at Downsview. Like not full, but it was. I couldn't believe how many people were there, and it was a certain demographic because there was at one point someone that came upon me and my 2 friends and were like, "How old are you guys? You look so young." I was like, dude, if you're looking at me and saying young, then that really does tell you it's an older audience here, because I do not think I scream young.
What's even like, well, how old did they look?
I mean, older than us, but not like it was, dude, put it this way. I was looking around. I don't think this was an under 30 crowd that was coming out for Joey and such. But the big Palazzo scene of the early 2000s, they came out in droves.
Palazzo?
Did you ever go to Palazzo? No,
never. No.
Club Menage.
I'm sorry.
King Street West. No. Okay. Back to the review. We also had Kevin Kelly, Excalibur, and Chris Charlton calling the 0 hour matches. Athena versus Billy Starks in the Owen Hart Cup was next. A fine match that they had, although not as not like this big breakout match. I thought for was that the next match? Yeah, that was the second match here.
You had this one that was next.
Yeah, so this one went about 8 minutes. You had Stark selling for a fair amount of it. They went back and forth with drop kicks, and then it starts with a swan dive landing on the edge of the apron. That looked fun. And then Athena hit her finish with the kind of a Stormbreaker into the DDT and advances in the tournament. I thought there was the chance that you would do the big upset of Billy Starks, but no, this was just a solid win for Athena, which is fine. You want to, I think, reacclimate her on the AEW side during this tournament, and she should be a a figure in the women's division on AEW, and she can moonlight in Ring of Honor, but I would not be making her exclusive. She's such an asset to the main shows. And from those that have been watching Ring of Honor every week, she has been a highlight consistently for people with this title run that she's had. So I think like that's the example of someone that let's not pigeonhole them as just being ROH exclusive.
Yeah, I think it would have been a neat idea to, have Billy Starks all of a sudden get this upset win and just continue on with a bit of momentum for an introduction to this tournament. But I mean, Athena at this point is also in need of a reintroduction for an audience who hasn't probably seen her on AEW TV in quite a while. And from all accounts, she's been doing great. So hopefully this will lead to that. I think she becomes maybe even a prime candidate to actually win the whole thing.
Then we had Stu Grayson. This was unexpected, taking on Logan Paul. And dude, this guy is just such a dead ringer for Logan Paul.
He's speaking of El Phantasmo.
And I wasn't the only one who noted this in our press area. So El Phantasmo just came out and it was like, okay, I'm in a cold match on this show, but man, am I going to show out? And he did springboard, swanton, quebrada follow up, top rope hurricane Rana, and then the splash off the top. There's a 450 by Stu onto the back for a 2 count, and then a springboard tornado DDT by El Phantasmo that he couldn't have hit more crisp into the CR2 and wins the match in 7 minutes and 14 seconds. I really enjoyed this match. It didn't come in with any kind of buildup. It was really just a let's go out there and show out for our 7 minutes. And man, I think El Phantasmo can be a breakout babyface. I'm very excited for him in the G1 this year in this role. But yeah, it was. I think this is the kind of match you want on a 0 hour. That it's not any stakes. It's not a big marquee match, but it was enjoyable for the time they had.
Sure, yeah. I can't really say it made that big of an impression on me. Other than the fact that El Phantasmo received a great reaction here, in Toronto, and it's a crowd that loves its Canadians, but even Canadians that aren't AEW. Regulars, they treated like a big deal. I felt there was very much like a sort of like a New Japan aura attached to anybody that is from that company, because they're rarely seen, and they nonetheless felt like stars tonight.
And the final 0 hour match, it was Shingo Takagi, Hiromu Takahashi, and Bushi against United Empire's Jeff Cobb, Kyle Fletcher, and TJP. They went 7.5 minutes, and big reaction for Hiromu. Cobb hit a suplex, and then Hiromu, he came down off this suplex from Cobb, and it was scary as hell. And instant memories of the Dragon Lee match with Hiromu. I freaked watching this, and he continued the match. He was fine. He didn't get spiked on the head, but goddamn was it dangerously close, too close. And unfortunately, I suppose this sort of thing will be a bigger conversation later on in the show, but especially for somebody like Hiromu, who is we should be reminded that we're extremely lucky that we even get him wrestling today. To put him in that sort of risky situation, man, I don't know about these belly to belly suplexes all the time. This was a lot like the Ridge Holland Big E spot. I mean, it was really, really scary to watch. Spin cycle into a Mamba splash by TJP on Shingo for a 2 count, but then it's Shingo making the big comeback on TJP and winning with Made in Japan, and LIJ get the victories here. So scary spot aside, a fine 6-man to go into the pay-per-view.
Agreed. I thought it was a good match. Certainly, felt deserving of a 0 hour main event, the best of the matches that we saw, in my opinion. Kyle Fletcher is looking really strong, as almost like a standout single star, without his partner here. He feels like he's definitely on the cusp of breaking out, onto his own. So he's emerging, and Tony basically said this was sort of like a preview, giving LIJ a big win ahead of their ROH match on this week, I think.
Yeah, and it was also brought up in the press conference by Tony Khan when he was asked sort of about the structuring of these shows, and it seems that what we got last month with the pre-show, where I think it was one match, and it seems that's going to be more the norm than this, where this was a case of all these talents were over, they wanted to get everyone on the show, but sort of loading up the 0 hour, it seems like they're going to do the kind of less is more approach. And we might be getting like 1 to 2 matches with a lot of interviews and stuff with RJ and Renee. So,
yeah,
I guess we'll see what they do for Wembley as well. That'll be their next pay-per-view, or Death Before Dishonor.
I was personally happy to see, certainly a Shingo Takagi and Hiromu Takahashi on this a pre-show, and for that reason, even like a strange match, like having I don't know, El Desperado be a part of Chaos to and the Best Friends to team up against the Mogul affiliates. I thought there was enough novelty in all these little matches that made this extended 0 hour worthwhile. But I definitely feel like there were some complaints, especially from people who aren't regular AEW viewers, about how long this show was by the end of it. So we started.
Did you feel this show? Like, what did you feel about? I didn't have an issue with it.
So I was exhausted after the 0 hour, John, and that was probably as much from everything like with Forbidden Pour as anything. But by the time the 0 hour ended, I'm like, how am I going to stay up for this 5 hour show? I was energized for this entire 5 hours because the show was this good, But I could see, if you're just kind of stepping into this as a bit more of a casual observer, certain people, I'm sure, would have been surprised that after Ospreay and Omega, there were still, 2 very lengthy matches to go. So it's a 5 hour show, and I think it's a good amount of time for most wrestling fans, but for a lot of people, it still feels like a lot.
Well, the pay-per-view proper, we move over to the commentary team of Kevin Kelly, Excalibur, and Taz as the 3-man team. And it is MJF and Hiroshi Tanahashi in the opener as they had set up on Collision. And MJF is out. He had his robe mocking New Japan as an indie. I think had an elbow pad. Ace is ass. So that has become the new Easter egg for MJF, is the hidden messages on the elbow pads. And you guys went over it. I was talking to you earlier in the day just about the Tanahashi match with Swerve. I would say Tanahashi came across better in this one, but I mean, the overall statement is still the same, that this guy is like, his knees are a wreck. He cannot even run at this point. Like, it's very challenging to watch him. Forget the slip on Saturday. To me, it was just everything before that. There was enough of real concern. And as much as we're so used to seeing Tanahashi work injured, it's at a point now where that Saturday match was the first time I've watched a Tanahashi match and this is really hard to watch this guy. And I've never been that critical of Tanahashi. And when you see the schedule he has this summer, it's daunting for a man that's going to turn 47 later this year.
Yeah, because he's got the G1. He's also got a bunch of indie dates internationally as well.
Which obviously, business relations, you understand that. But, this guy should not be going over to do House of Glory and Impact. Like, there is a plethora of talent that New Japan can send over. When this, I honestly believe this should be his final G1. And I just think, this guy is just being held together by God knows what at this point.
From what we've known, it's not like he's even had much of an extended time off to be able to heal up from a lot of those injuries. And I would at the very least hope for him to be able to achieve that, and not to do the G1 this year, because if these 2 matches this weekend are any indication, every single one of those G1 matches are going to be a struggle. I mean, I always thought he was the type of wrestler that, like, even with a broken down body, could really get by creating a compelling match, and he is able to.
Oh, he can get by on, his charisma is through the roof, and he can get by on a lesser version. But the high fly flows are such a signature, and it feels like that is probably something that, at least minimizing the amount you're doing in a match, or changing things around. Like, he is beyond, to me, like the Liger switchover of his career. Like, he has to, I think, completely reinvent a certain stuff. Not reinvent, because I think
he has to take time off, I think, just to hopefully heal some of those injuries. But man, who knows how long that time is. And I would say, like, as much as I even love his selling and his ability to play the crowd, I don't think it was enough, especially for big stage matches like this one on this pay-per-view for a championship.
They went 15 minutes and 46 seconds. MJF was great in the match as sort of quarterbacking this thing, and they just tried to get the most out of the star power involved, involving both guys to the audience. Like the reactions were huge for the entrances for Tanahashi and MJF. MJF was mockingly playing the air guitar, loud chants of coward as MJF went up the ramp. And dude, like they got into an abdominal stretch by Max into Tanahashi fighting for the counter to escape. MJF did the flare spot, flipping in the corner and then getting tossed off the top. And then there was a shoulder breaker to Tanahashi, pokes him in the eyes. He's giving the middle finger. And then Tanahashi hits the high fly flow, but lands on the knees. And Bryce stops MJF from using a belt shot. And Tanahashi gets a visual cover as Bryce is distracted. And then it's the ring that MJF takes out of the trunks and cracks Tanahashi with and gets the win. 15 minutes, 46 seconds. Not one of the standout matches not a bad match, but it was sort of just, kind of mid-tier, which is not going to be a standout on a show like this.
Yeah, and I think from what my expectations are of like MJF singles matches, especially MJF, title defenses at this point, I definitely thought this one was a step down. I thought he did some great crowd work to be able to carry this one and to kind of make it memorable for that reason. Great atmosphere for that reason, simply because it's a really hated heel, and no matter how Tanahashi performs in the ring, he's going to be one of the most beloved wrestlers on any roster that he appears on. So that was enough to make this a compelling match, at least in terms of atmosphere. But in ring, I thought it was a step below your MJF title match. Tanahashi is very slow and limited right now. And I would even say by the end, it kind of felt like to me, the match went a bit longer than it needed to.
And now Max goes on to the Adam Cole program, which involves teaming together in this blind eliminator draw. And do you see that as the all-in match, or could there be another destination for MJF and Adam Cole?
Seems like it would be peaking towards all in, with the tag tournament probably taking a good amount of time. All out, of course, is also a possibility as well. They're essentially the same time frame, so if they want to do a tag team match the weekend before and then the actual title match the weekend after, I don't think that's out of the possibility.
Let's go over those dates that they did announce. So after All In, they will do 3 shows in the starved metropolis of Chicago. They will go Wednesday night at the Now Arena for Dynamite and Rampage, and then they're going to do back-to-back nights at the United Center. So you'll have Collision on Saturday, which is head-to-head with the WWE show in Pittsburgh, and then Sunday night will be All Out at the United Center.
Yeah. So a return to Chicago on the weekend that we all suspected, right after All In. So it's incredibly ambitious. We will see how they book the matches to feel compelling for both of these events. Now we probably can safely assume All Out will be on traditional pay-per-view. Still no knowledge of
There was no update on All In and the broadcast information when Tony was asked.
Mm-hmm. But I guess if there's a market that could sustain all these shows, it's kind of proven to be Chicago, right?
Yeah. What are you thinking more and more about these weekends? Because they're going to be happening on a semi-frequent basis where you're going to have the big WWE show on a Saturday. You've got Collision now, and then Sunday. Like, do you think this helps, hurts, or is indifferent to an AEW pay-per-view, like an All Out, where you have the WWE show the night prior, like that weekend? Do you think like this does it take a dent out of All Out, or vice versa to the WWE show?
I don't think it takes anything away from All Out. Like, All Out feels so big to anybody who, knows about AEW and would probably care to watch one of these events anyway. I would say the same for like a Forbidden Door. If even WWE had like, a PLE the night prior, the PLEs don't cost. It helps that the PLEs aren't pay-per-views and that, audiences aren't paying $50 2 times on a weekend rather than just one. So, I don't think it makes a big difference. Like, AEW shows have been relatively infrequent and have been so consistently exceptional, pay-per-views, I should say, that I think people are still making them priorities.
Yeah, I do think NXT running against an AEW show, I think that was a mistake on NXT's part. I think that was totally lost, and I don't know if they would replicate that again in the future. But I am very curious in this next year if we do get an example where it's a big WWE show against an AEW pay-per-view head-to-head on that night. I don't know if that would happen, but that would be, you can't discount that as the next step in, some of this counter programming.
We're also coming up to maybe our first instance of WWE running a PLE up against Collision, and how will Collision
SummerSlam, we will have that. I mean, that will be the night where we see what does AEW put up against it. And conversely, on the night before All Out, like that will be a big Collision if you're booking the United Center, and that's going against the Pittsburgh show. I think Payback is the show. So,
right. Yeah. Well, they have a pretty good runway, at least, with Money in the Bank taking place in the afternoon. Special, unique start time.
Unique start time. Satoshi Kojima, the biggest Canadian babyface on this show, against CM Punk, who comes out. And I'm not going to say it was not like, there was definitely cheers for Punk, but they were greatly drowned out by the boos. And again, as I felt on Saturday, I think this makes for a really compelling atmosphere when you have CM Punk, who again felt like a megastar on this show because of those reactions. I would not be viewing this reaction in Toronto as a negative at all. I thought that he came in, and this is going to be the allure of Punk, is that, yes, we're out of Chicago. What are the reactions going to be like? It could be very different in Hamilton, or they could just piggyback off Toronto. But that's part of the appeal now, is seeing how these different markets react to CM Punk. It's like, this is your presidential candidate, and he's going to red and blue states, and we're going to see which is which over this campaign that is his return. Campaign Punk.
Very nice. Yes. Yeah. I certainly, it's what made Saturdays for 8-man tags so special and entertaining to me, was every instance of CM Punk tagging and just being able to hear this crowd, be rebellious in its sort of reactions to just any.
Did we get a Bizarro World line on commentary? I doubt we did, but we did not hear commentary.
We did not get it on Saturday, so I don't know if we would have gotten it on Sunday either. But listen, the worst thing you can have as a professional wrestler is to have an apathetic crowd, and these crowds for CM Punk are anything but apathetic. This was some of the biggest reaction throughout the entire night. In hindsight, I'm almost kind of grateful that we didn't necessarily get a Kenta match, because having somebody like a Satoshi Kojima, who, I don't know how much people like in Toronto would have necessarily, I guess, cared.
There was the Kenta is better chant that started midway through the match.
Sure, yeah. But that was almost just, a way to antagonize Punk, right? But I'm saying, Satoshi Kojima being on the show, like, he's a baby face. He's a New Japan dad that is and a legend that's like very hard to like dislike. I think almost having like a straight up heel like a Kenta be opposed to Punk would have made this match a little bit more awkward, because having somebody like a Satoshi Kojima against Punk, allowed him to play a straight up baby face and allowed the audience to put all their negative, or at least their heel energy towards a CM Punk, and for CM Punk to play a great heel, I thought, in this match.
I thought so too. Like, this was not Punk fighting the crowd. Like, he just flipped it into heel mode, and he had to know coming off of Saturday what the reaction was going to be like. I thought he was great in this match. I enjoyed this. Like, for the time they had, it was 13 minutes and 40 seconds. Kojima, like, everything was over. He's doing the flexing his pecs to the crowd. They're going nuts
and
for
then
him.
Punk did his own pec dance.
Oh, okay. I missed that part. Well, that's great.
Well, yeah. It's it's something,
Punk did all the little heel things, like getting Kojima in the corner, and he wound up for the big chop, but instead he stops and kicks him in the knee, just like a great spot there. And then
he's the Mongolian chops.
The Mongolian chops, great. I really liked all the little things he did. And then he gets the big come up where Kojima reverses him, and the machine gun chops are levied onto Punk. And he goes in multiple corners doing this. Then there's the top rope elbow by Punk, and he goes to the Anaconda Vice, which is, Tenzon's move, which, I mean, what a beautiful connection that you're not even thinking of in this match. That was like a nice little tie-in with Kojima and his famous partner.
Well, it's almost like Tenzon. This is the big buildup for Punk versus Tenzon, if there ever was one, with all the Mongolian chops and the Anaconda Vice. So.
Yes, a man who can not even stand straight. So whatever we said about Tanahashi, X10 to Tenzon.
Forbidden Door 3.
Forbidden
Tenzon
Door 3
versus Punk. Okay.
Yes. Kojima stops a GTS, and then there's a brainbuster for the 2 count. And then on his second attempt, Punk does hit the GTS, or at least the put his chest to sleep with the knee strike where it landed, and he pins Kojima. Listen, I thought Punk looked great in this match, and Kojima was an awesome babyface for this crowd. And it was the perfect spot in the show for this level of match, and also gave the out for when Tony Khan was asked why Punk wasn't at the press conference. Was the match was earlier in the evening?
Yes.
Sure. No Punk at the press conference, but as said, he's doing lots of media, and I'm sure he'll do a great job on another future press conference.
Yes. Really fun match. I actually thought this was one of the highlights of the evening, just again, due to crowd response and just the fun of being able to boo a CM Punk that's not necessarily a heel. And I hope this is something that carries across throughout the rest of Canada. I'd be very curious to see his reaction in Calgary, because they're still going really full on with all the Brett tribute gear. But in Toronto, that didn't really make a lick of difference at all. I thought Punk played with the reaction perfectly, gave us this great teasing heel performance, genuinely looking like he was having fun in there, thriving in enemy territory. So it's really for the benefit of both the performer and also for the in-ring on-screen product as well, that they continue to play with this more so than John Cena. CM Punk is a baby face with an edge, who's not afraid to antagonize and do things that could just be straight up deemed heelish in certain territories. And I think that makes him far more compelling and interesting as a character. Great performance from Satoshi Kojima, I felt. Obviously it helps having a crowd reaction like this, but because of he had that, it gave you so much more appreciation for all the things that he probably usually shows that aren't as appreciated, like his incredible charisma in ring. I thought everything he's still able to do looked really good. The machine gun chops got a great reaction, so I'm glad this one had time. I enjoyed this more than MJF Tanahashi.
Oh, I did too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Third match on the pay-per-view was the AEW International Championship 4-way, with Orange Cassidy defending against Zack Sabre Jr., Katsuyori Shibata, and Daniel Garcia. And this was a hell of a match that I saw a ton of praise for. And I was amazed this was only 11 minutes and 27 seconds, because they worked in so much, and you had all these competing stories of all four figures coming into this match. And this audience, like, understanding all the submissions of Zach, the history of Shibata, and Daniel Garcia, who to me, this has been, he was a great addition to this too, because he needed something like this, that coming out of, he feels reignited as well, and continues the Cassidy story with this title reign. So, all four are down after a series of boots. Garcia delivers a belt shot to Shibata, and the crowd is yelling, "You're a wrestler." And Shibata and Orange Cassidy, they sit cross-legged in front of one another. They're slapping one another. And then Orange hits the orange punch with the bad hand. Zach escapes a Shibata rear naked choke using the European clutch, and Daniel Garcia makes the save. There's a PK to Garcia, but Cassidy is then in and removes Shibata from the ring to steal the pin with a cradle. Afterwards, the three champions, which are Cassidy with the international title, Shibata, and Zach, they're all standing there with their respective championships, and indicating like several potential directions that comes out of this. But they did shake hands in the end with Cassidy and Shibata, the remaining two.
Yeah, so it does make you wonder what further combination they can have, with all three and their titles. I mean, I imagine Zach will put up his, TV championship or New Japan World Championship against one of the two.
Maybe that's a post G1 type of direction you could incorporate Zach, because I don't think he'd be available for a while. But Shibata and Garcia would seem likely for ROH, and then this Shibata Cassidy match could be anywhere this summer, if that seems to be the next big international championship match.
Yeah, I thought this match was really excellent. I thought it was great at creating little chapters and excitement throughout. It almost felt like, this really interesting choreographed like four-way dance that felt different from anything else on the show, and everybody was able to have their standout moment or standout trait. Garcia, I thought, made a big impact based off of his sense of humor, and just kind of being a little bit of the butt end of the joke throughout the match, but still like very entertaining for his dancing and whatnot. Shibata, I thought, for his stiffness, I mean, I've had several people remark to me afterwards that they still consider it such a novelty and such an amazing thing that they got to see Katsuyori Shibata wrestling live. And he's not just doing like pure rules, like no back bumping type of wrestling here. He's going full on pretty much. And obviously you hope every performer is cleared and completely okay to do it. But here he wrestled a full match on a New Japan show. So he finally got his little thing. Orange Cassidy, I think, continues to sell the storyline tremendously. And Zach for his unbelievable speed and technical counter wrestling. There were moments and sequences here that were just like, wow. It was chess, but it was speed chess. And there's no better physical embodiment of speed chess than Zack Sabre.
Yeah, I thought one of the best matches on the show was this 4-way. Can't say the same about the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship match where Sonata retained against Jack Perry. I thought this was going to be the sleeper match of the show. I thought they were just going to tear it up with the two of them. Sonata was, I didn't sense the same kind of aura that a lot of the other Japanese stars had on this show, which I think does tell you it's not a case of them not knowing Sonata, because this is an audience that is clearly up on all New Japan. I think it's just a realistic understanding of where Sonata is in terms of his level of star. Like, this is not a guy that is at the top level of the biggest Japanese. Like, compare him to Kojima, and granted, Kojima was there with Punk. But
Sonata versus Punk would have garnered a pretty big reaction for Sonata, but I know what you're saying. Like for Jack Perry, I think was a strange choice. Like if you listen to Tony, he wanted something big for Jack Perry, and obviously something to set up this post match angle on a big show. I completely understand. But it's not that attractive of a matchup, and I wouldn't say Sonata has been making that many waves as champion right now. He also doesn't necessarily have an in-ring style that I think is as flashy as some of his contemporaries in New Japan.
Yeah, I mean, the most over babyface in the match was Red Shoes, followed by Hook. So the performers in the actual match were like third and fourth. And then Perry tried to apply the Paradise Lock onto Sonata, who stopped him. And Sonata, it was like a decent back and forth, but I never felt like this ever got near like the second gear that you would expect for an IWGP World Heavyweight Championship match. Not to say this had the expectation of a Sumo Hall main event, but certainly on a pay-per-view, this one fell under the expectations for me. Like, Sonata won with a moonsault, and it was sort of just out of nowhere. Like, I wasn't even expecting this to be the finish because it just felt somewhat flat. And this match, it's going to be remembered for the post-match, which was Jungle Boy blasting Hook on the stage for the expected heel turn, although probably a lot earlier than everyone was expecting. Like, this would be small seeds leading to the turn, but they jumped ahead to execute that, and he lifted up the FTW belt and left it. And then they cut to the broadcast team, and Taz takes the glasses off, and I can only imagine Taz was phenomenal reacting to this to get the angle over with Hook. So I do want to go back and watch Taz's part. So I thought an underwhelming match overall.
I thought so too, and if it wasn't a bad match, it's not the type of thing where I'd be like, "Wow, this really dragged the card down." It didn't. It wasn't to the standard.
It's a high standard that we're looking at this show, and there were matches that met it and matches that did not. I had higher expectations for this than maybe most did. Like, I saw this as not the match that jumps off the page at you, but I thought this, like, if they get there 15 minutes, this could be a hell of a match.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know what it is, but it's not the type of in-ring combination that I think made for anything that special. But most people are going to be remembering this for the post-match angle. I agree. I thought it was a bit soon, but this type of Jungle Hook turn, is
Mowgli
one that
is still a babyface.
That's right. Yes. Everybody was expecting it anyway, so maybe just kind of get it over with so they could push to something for Allin, you would think.
Yeah, I would aim for something like this. Should be the summer program for the two of them. I just wish there was, I mean, you do have a history with them. It's not as though they were just thrown together recently. Like, you do have that connection. I just don't think it was established enough that I thought you would spend part of the summer of these two having each other's back. But everyone, like, when you watched Jack Perry's match with Doki on Rampage, like, you could see the audience was all ready for the turn. And so was Jack Perry, who was very good in this match with Doki. But it did feel as though, everyone is ready for the turn, and they decided to get ahead of it with this. And it was a huge reaction when it happened. Eddie Kingston, Tomohiro Ishii, the Young Bucks, and Hangman Page against Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, Wheeler Yuta, Konosuke Takeshita, and Shota Umino in our 10-man tag. And this was, I mean, the reactions were huge for all of the entrances here. Eddie Kingston got a superstar level reaction, and
Mox came out to his New Japan theme, which I think is a way better theme for a heel group than Wild Thing. But I like today how a lot of the guys who cross over, like Kenny, came out to their New Japan themes.
Yes, it's worth noting this was the first time that all the relevant parties from the fallout of All Out were under one roof together, and reportedly at separate spots in the arena. And it didn't sound like there were not any problems, and it doesn't sound like there were any interactions either from Punk with the Bucks or anything like that. So they got through this, and I guess if that's a win, that's great.
It's I don't think it was ever going to be that big of an issue with them being on the same show. I mean, just for the sheer fact that sports teams are in two different locker rooms, and they design these buildings, to keep people apart. But it's just kind of silly that we still even have to do that, for a professional wrestling roster.
Well, a lot of this was focused on Moxley and Kingston. They had a showdown. The crowd is with Eddie, and they just had these back and forth chops. Eventually, all 10 get involved, and they're brawling. Tomohiro Ishii, there have been times when you've seen him, he's feeling the years, but my God, did he stand out in this match? And here we are, and Ishii is going to be the man that time forgets, and is just going to be, death, taxes, and Ishii come G1 season. He is he was so over in this match, and it was booked for him to be one of the big stars of this match, getting the pinfall at the end of it. I would love to see Claudio and Ishii together. They were a great combination in this. There were a lot of great combinations throughout this. Takeshita ducked a BTE trigger, so the Bucks' knees went into one another. Moxley then eats super kicks by the Bucks. There was a giant swing on Matt Jackson, and eventually Moxley catches Kingston with a cutter. And then the Bucks double super kick Moxley. Yuta is in, and he ducks a buckshot lariat. But Ishii, he is the legal man, lands a sliding D onto Yuta, followed by the vertical drop brainbuster, and he pins Wheeler Yuta. So I would not have suspected Yuta taking the cover right after he got that big pin on Kenny Omega, and even Ishii being the one to get the win. So certainly these cards are balanced in a, what is AEW getting? What is New Japan getting? I would state that would probably give you a sense of, Ishii is not just a, guy that is booked on these shows. The fact that he is getting the fall here, obviously that was by design for a reason. And I could certainly see post G1 Ishii having, Danielson said, that's the guy I want to work with next. It's Ishii.
Right. Yeah.
Which God knows what that match would include.
Yeah, I don't know. Ishii feels like such a staple of a New Japan roster that I don't know how much of an extended run we would be able to I guess anticipate from him in AEW. But the occasional spot, he's somebody that like we saw on Wednesday, you just simply announce him, and I think he gets a really good reaction from the audience, and certainly in ring that's a guaranteed positive result. So it could just be maybe a little bit of political, hey, you get this guy winning, I get this guy winning, that maybe just resulted in Ishii taking the win here. But I don't know. I don't know if I personally looked that deep into it, but I thought it was an excellent match. Eddie is incredibly over, which I would say he was the biggest babyface of the group, consisting of Hangman Page and the Young Bucks. And that's saying something given Eddie Kingston's recent lack of airtime. The fact that he manages to garner these immense reactions just no matter what. So
one key spot I missed was when the Bucks were going for the double super kick onto Moxley. Kingston dove in to save Moxley and ate the super kicks himself, and then Moxley hits the cutter to Kingston after that. So you had Kingston he's at odds with Moxley, but in the line of fire, he still took the bullet for Moxley, and then Moxley did not do the same, hitting him with the cutter. So that would seem to be coming out of this sort of Kingston and Moxley going into some kind of program. Although Kingston's not going to be available during
G1.
that G1. So it's weird. Like in another era, you would have Moxley do some big injury angle to write off Kingston. But I think with this audience, it's kind of insulting when you know the guy's not hurt. He's going off to do a tournament that I would not suspect them doing that kind of an angle. But certainly that would be maybe a match for Chicago, or even, I mean, again, you have all these big shows at the end of the summer, but Moxley and Kingston would be a big match.
Moxley Kingston is just sort of like a story that is going to be carrying on through the years, and all you really need for an audience is to kind of like show them these little chapters. And even if you have like 2 months between something like this and the match itself, the audience will still be there for it. So they laid the necessary groundwork to really build up to a big match between the two, whether at All In or All Out. I'll say I didn't really love some of the more melodramatic like instances like of Kingston, shoving Moxley out of the way for the super kick. And I'm a huge fan of that sort of like storytelling stuff, but I don't know if it made a whole lot of sense here, given that like these two chopped each other for like 5 minutes straight. And then Kingston suddenly got a heart and decided to shove Moxley out of the way for the super kick. Maybe commentary was able to explain it a bit better, but I thought that was maybe a little bit of an overreach. That some incredible spots though, including like the ever and never ending chop fest between the two. As everybody else was doing their dives on the outside, there was great energy anytime Mox and Kingston were there together, but also great energy anytime Hangman and the Bucks were doing their Hung Bucks, three-way spots. Takeshita, I also thought worked really well as a heel in this match, and I love seeing him paired with Tomohiro Ishii. Everybody like did really well, I thought.
Toni Storm and Willow Nightingale for the AEW Women's Championship. There was a DVD to Storm on the edge of the apron. Saraya and Ruby are in the corners, but that led to the big ejection spot. And Toni Storm hits the hip attack and won with the Storm Zero. And they showed Britt Baker watching in the back. She's got the match with Ruby Soho this coming Wednesday in the Owen Hart Cup. I thought like a fine match. It was not one of the standouts on the show, but fine for the time they had. The audience was into Willow Nightingale. And the big focus afterwards when Toni Storm was on the press conference was about Julia issuing the challenge. And it looks like Julia and Willow Nightingale coming up on those Independence Day shows next week.
In Japan,
yes, the Korakuen Hall shows.
Yeah. So, I think likely title change, and maybe that's how we get to Julia versus Mercedes, perhaps. So Willow seems like she's got plenty going on, between this tournament and just, I'm sure, everything else that like this has been a really, it's been an unfortunate thing anytime a wrestler gets injured, but it's been like Willow has stepped up to the plate, not just on the night that she faced Mercedes and had to kind of go with that impromptu finish, but also she feels like a very good fitting champion here. So we got, not just her winning on Collision, but also getting I would say a pretty good, title match here. It was at about the level that I expected. Hard hitting, good looking offense from both of them. In terms of importance, maybe didn't feel as high as some of the others. I'm still not a huge fan of like all the generic heel work from the Outcasts, but I suppose it was effective, especially against a baby face like Willow.
Do you prefer their heel work in the body of a show or at a press conference? What are your preferences?
I'm sure you have plenty of thoughts on.
We'll talk about the press conference after. I have lots of thoughts. Okay. So earlier this year, Wei got me to climb the CN Tower steps, and I had to really prepare, but not as much as I had to prepare knowing I'd be doing note-taking for Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, the rematch for the IWGP US Championship on Sunday. So here we are. I mean, when this graphic came up, this place came unglued. What did you think of the placement, Way, of the match in the end? Third from the top.
I think by the end, I understand why. Tony like also has shown that he's not afraid to maybe stack the two big main events side by side too. But they decided to put Sting and Jericho, that 6-man tag as a buffer match. And so that resulted in this essentially being third from the top, but really second from the top if we're talking about, main events. I thought it probably worked to the benefit of this match, but I would have ended the show with this. I felt that way going into it, knowing the type of athleticism and spectacle that these two would be able to provide that. Danielson and Okada, even without Danielson's injury, would have been able to. But, you know, whatever. Like, honestly, you can't go wrong. Both of them would have been very satisfying, but this was certainly the match of the show by a good mile.
Yeah, we had, both of them out to their, Ospreay out to his old like aerial assassin theme, and Omega out to his New Japan theme. So no battle cry. And I mean, this felt like a New Japan presentation in many ways. Don Callis is out with Ospreay with two masked security members. This was coming off the angle on Wednesday where he would provide Ospreay with security. And you think this is leading to something, and it went nowhere in the match. And I was not complaining about that. It was almost as though it was a decoy that you were going to get some involvement from the identities of these two, but there was nothing.
I wonder when Will Ospreay shows up next in AEW and whether or not we continue to see these, assailants or security guards, or maybe it's just somebody that will transfer over to Keshida. And they didn't look to me like they're supposed to be anybody that we were going to recognize when they unmasked, but maybe it's just just to have extra muscle.
So early on, it's just each having the other figured out with not all these counters. A one-winged angel is teased very early. Oscutter is blocked. And then Don Callis gets involved, tripping Omega as he's going for the Terminator dive. And that leads to Callis being ejected by the referee, although would return later in the match. And some of the highlights included Kenny being draped on the top and a shooting star press from Ospreay, followed by an Oscutter onto the edge. And then Ospreay takes the panel off the announcer's desk and starts ramming Kenny's head to it, sort of the opposite of the Wrestle Kingdom match where it's the table that Kenny is ramming Ospreay's head into. So then Ospreay, so after the headshots, Omega is bleeding after this. And then Will does his Shawn Michaels impression, taking the Canadian flag and rubbing his balls with it and mocking the Canadian flag. Spots that would be a lot more hostile if it was a Canadian doing to an American flag. But in Canada, I guess more freedom to desecrate the Canadian flag.
We're a bit nicer. Maybe we don't take our flags maybe as seriously as some other countries.
Give a lot of leeway to the heels. So then Omega makes his comeback, taking and hanging Will Ospreay with the Canadian flag over the top rope. And then he busts Will's head open.
So attached to the whole flag thing was the little kid that apparently was flipping Ospreay off in the front row. And so Ospreay apparently improvised, or at least I doubt it was improvised. I mean, this whole thing was so well done, but Kenny ended up giving the flag to the little kid, and it made for a wonderful visual from on screen.
A lifetime patriot coming out of this as a child. So we got double blood after Ospreay's head is sent into the steps, and then there's a DDT to Will onto the steps as well, which for me, the highlight was the reactions of these three individuals who were in the front row who were so animated. There was a guy with sunglasses on. I think another guy had a post-wrestling shirt on. And then we had Robert Pearson, our man Neil, and Brandon from New Jersey front and center for so many of these. If you have not seen some of the highlights, the best being Tanahashi high-fiving Brandon from New Jersey, like a meeting of the minds, if there ever was one.
Like, think about the circumstances that would have to happen for this universe to put Brandon from New Jersey with Hiroshi Tanahashi in the same physical space and the two of them actually touching. Wonderful. I think that, it was just my highlight really of the entire show.
So Will continues here. We've got, there was this great spot where Kenny tries to go to the grappling department with a armbar into a triangle armbar, and Will gets out and he goes for the sharpshooter and then transitions to the crossface, and this elicits chants of "you sick fuck" at Will Ospreay. And there were some people that did not appreciate this spot, especially given like the weekend that this was, but nonetheless.
Sorry, what the
Well, with the
Blood?
crossface, I mean, this was the weekend that marks the anniversary, since if you can call it that, of like the murder suicide as well. So he escapes like, you know, the two Canadian spots here, for lack of a better term. And there's an Os cutter attempt where Omega strikes him in midair with a knee. And then Will stops a Kreutz Wrath off the top, which was a spot that we got in the first match in January.
Yes.
After that, it's the cheeky Nando's kick. That was the spot in the first match where Kenny got his eye busted as well. And then a Sky Twister press to the floor. Callis returns and he shields Will Ospreay on the apron, but Kenny doesn't care. He still goes for the V-trigger, and Callis, being the coward, lets go of Ospreay, so he takes the brunt of it. And then it was the screwdriver that Callis handed to Ospreay. That was the weapon. So it's the callback to the heel turn with the screwdriver, and he nails Kenny with it to stop the one-winged angel. And from there, hits the hidden blade and the Stormbreaker, and everyone thinks it's over. And Kenny's foot, it doesn't get onto the rope. It's literally touching the rope, and this place goes nuts. So then Kenny
it was such an incredible like foot on the ropes spot, because you know they both have their ultimate finishers that nobody ever kicks out of in the Stormbreaker and One-Winged Angel. At this point, you know, both finishers that have been protected so well through years. And I thought they did such a great job with, like, you know, teasing Callis and then having Callis come out that you just automatically think, okay, the moment we see an ultimate finisher, it's the end of the match. They did this so well, and they positioned their bodies so incredibly well that, like, I was writing in my notes, okay, Stormbreaker match ends. And then I see, looking up, like, Kenny's foot actually on the ropes and the match is actually continuing. It completely took this crowd to another level.
Yeah, I mean, man, this ending was just unreal. So they go insane for this near fall, and then Kenny is on his knees, and he gets his wrists grabbed by Ospreay, who drills Kenny with the Kamigoye, and then follows with his own One-Winged Angel. Kenny kicks out at one. This was, to me, the pop of the night. This was the best spot that I'm going to remember from this match, was this 1 count kick out. And it was both like legitimate, like, belief in this baby face that this crowd had, and also that this is continuing as well. Like, it was so well done. Yeah. This 1 count kick out. I just thought it was amazing.
And again, you're talking about the One-Winged Angel, of which I believe only Kota Ibushi has kicked out of. And nobody kicks out of it unless, of course, you're Kenny Omega himself. And not only can you kick out of it, you can kick out of it at one. Like, this was very much like a Hulk Hogan type of like kick out spot, you know. Like, took me back to like WrestleMania 18, where it was something like a rock bottom, and then Hogan kicks out at one, and he just it was a big Hulk up moment for Kenny that completely worked.
Yeah, and much like Hogan would do with some of his bigger matches, came back with a Kreutz Wrath onto Will Ospreay.
Took a Tiger Driver 91.
So that was what's probably going to be the most focused upon spot of the entire match. It is the prelude to the finish as Ospreay hits a Tiger Driver 91. And this was the most frightening thing I have seen in a long time, and one that I think a lot of people were uneasy with seeing. And I'm watching this, and first of all, you're just like holding your breath watching this and hoping this guy is okay. And then you're also thinking about, like, listen, I cannot just totally like dog this spot when these are two guys that are coming in. The weight of the world, of this wrestling world, for not to be too dramatic, is on their shoulders to follow this classic. And here's Kenny Omega. This is his contract year. He is going to sign a deal, regardless of what he decides to do. It is millions that this man is going to be standing to make. And he's doing a spot like this, you know what I mean? For a match that is already this classic. Listen, I can understand like the level to try and deliver the greatest match ever, but man, I don't ever want to see this. It's too much for me. The margin for error is like, look at this. And yeah, listen, it's that's where the expectation level is. And I don't know. It, to me, is too far, but people are going to have different definitions of what is too far, performers and fans.
Yeah. there's always going to be a constant chase for that memorable moment, that moment that everybody will be talking about. And you know, in many professional wrestling matches, it's moves where people have teased, you know, some form of head trauma, some form of paralysis, I suppose. You know, without knowing the limits of the performer, it's hard for me to say like what should be acceptable and what's not. I don't even necessarily know, you know, how Kenny is feeling coming out of this, but this one looked really, really risky. Even more so than usual, you know, Tiger Driver 91s that we've seen from Masawa. This was very, very scary. But
it's a rough
man,
year.
What do you mean?
91.
Oh yeah. You know, you asked Bryan Danielson about it, whether or not this type of thing.
Yeah, he was definitely uneasy about watching the spot, but again, he does not want. He understands like it's this line that we tap dance around, and he admitting like I did a lot of things that I would not do today when I was trying to get noticed, and like his point, and I agreed with this, was like, did this make the match that much better? To me, if this spot doesn't happen, I'm having the exact same opinion of this match. And I would argue that the 1 count kick out to me was the biggest reaction of the entire match, the entire show as well. But again, like these guys were literally in a spot where they were chasing perfection that many associate with that match in January. It's like, that's the level that they have. And then that becomes, you know, the larger issue is that when you have performers that are this driven, what are those mechanisms in place to protect performers from themselves? And that's where Danielson mentioned the fact that, you know, when he has some ambitious plans, he goes to the medical team ahead of time and runs things by him. And they are very frank with him about what is doable, what is not, and encourages other guys to do that. But there's many that are just going to, you know, you don't know what is what is crossing the line until you cross it, and sometimes that can be a really scary outcome. But listen, we have seen some awful outcomes in matches. It does not appear that this was one of them. But again, you are just getting right to the limits of what the human body should be producing for entertainment's sake. It only leads to the 2 count, and then a hidden blade Stormbreaker combo keeps Kenny down, and Will Ospreay regains the United States Heavyweight Championship. And the debate coming out of this match will be which Omega Ospreay match is people's match of the year, because I think this is a 1-2 race for the remainder of the year, and potentially a third match that comes with these two as well. But this was an utter classic. To me, one of the greatest matches you're going to see, I think, just in the immediate aftermath of this. And I can honestly look at that as a real debate. I did rewatch the first match this past weekend just to like refresh myself on it. And listen, you could go either way. I think both matches hold up in significant ways. This is the extension of the story, and this does seem to be the setup for a third and final chapter, whether that's at Wembley or a date to be determined. But this was, just an unbelievable, I think like an all-time classic when you're looking at some of the greatest matches in the company's history, and among the greatest matches these two have had, and individually in their careers, which think of the resumes that entails. I think for both of these men, this is among their greatest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're seeing like an all-time trilogy plus, you know, series unfolding before our eyes. And certainly this is now maybe posing the biggest threat to Okada and Omega as sort of like the default greatest rivalry, certainly in New Japan Pro Wrestling history, maybe in modern professional wrestling history. These matches are spectacular. They are physically completely impressive. I think they're incredibly inventive and creative, and they give you something memorable from pretty much every instance of the match. I loved all the stuff that they did with the flag throughout. But it was this final 10-minute stretch, maybe even more than that. I don't know. Time kind of, you know, was hard for me to gauge because I was so in the moment watching this match.
But this was a 40-minute match, by the way.
Wow. Everything from like the point when Callis came in, and, you know, wrestling audiences at that point kind of expecting a finish to be very near. and how they just played with that sort of tension throughout the rest of the remainder of the match with all their false finishes that I completely bit into, like, everyone, was really incredible. Like, it took you to a high, and it just either kept you there or it escalated that high through just incredible action, whether it be, maybe in the form of a head dropping move, or maybe just in the very clever usage of both of their very well protected finishers in the Stormbreaker and also in the One Winged Angel. Everything clicked, everything worked, and it more than lived up to the expectations that we all had. Again, debatable whether or not you felt this was better than the first one, but the fact that they even lived up to it is remarkable. And so
the fact you can have that discussion is a win.
Unfortunately, it only raises expectations that much higher for number 3, and for these two to exceed even that. So let's keep our expectations, like, maybe a little bit tempered. But
would that seem the logical match for Wembley with these two?
I think if you're talking about the biggest stage, again, politically, I don't exactly know how they want to split these up. Does New Japan get one? Does AEW get one? And then technically this is both of their shows. So maybe the next one is an AEW only show. All In would be the biggest possible stage other than the Tokyo Dome. But more people are going to be at Wembley than the Tokyo Dome for them to do a show this. So I certainly would hope so. Ospreay was asked at the press conference about whether or not he'd be performing on the show, and he says it's up to Tony Khan, but he would love to because it's 40 minutes down from his house. But I can't think of a better headlining match than Ospreay versus Omega 3.
Yes. Well, I'm glad Wembley's close by, making it more convenient for Will Ospreay.
Yeah, if it wasn't, he wouldn't do it.
Like, you're a different area code. It's anyway. So yeah, a classic match that people will be talking about for a long time, and especially at the end of the year.
They'll be talking about it until number 3 comes along and maybe replaces it.
Oh, this was so much better than that second one. That just like the most unenviable spot on the show, but it is the Sting specialty of just put this man and he'll follow whatever. It was the Suzuki Gods against Sting, Darby Allin, and Tetsuya Naito. And this was Sting's first match in this building since facing Bret Hart in November of 1999, which, to put into perspective, was 1 month after Hiroshi Tanahashi's debut.
And I'm sure before some of the roster members on this, like, how old was Billy Starks born?
This was 2 years before Julia Hart was born.
Okay. All right.
So the big focus was on Sting and Jericho having their first interaction in a match. There was a Scorpion Deathlock applied to Jericho, and then after it's broken up, a triple Sex Gods pose with Jericho, Suzuki, and Guevara. Guevara, man, he nearly killed Sting at one point. Then there was a one-man Spanish fly to Darby. Jericho brings out a table, and that would lead to a 630 spot by Guevara off the top to Sting on this table.
Yeah, I think a lot of people saw this and suspected that Sting was supposed to get out of the way. He did not. Just judging by the rest of this match and how Sting did not really sell this 630 through a table at all. He just kind of got up and did his next spots.
He was instantly in for the Scorpion Deathlock, and then Suzuki coming at him. Yeah, so man,
he's probably supposed to get up. Hope he wasn't hurt, and I hope Sammy wasn't hurt as a result, of this as well. They mentioned in the press conference that he had to go get checked in the medical room. Don't know if it was a work or not, because much of that segment did feel,
we'll get to that,
unfortunately, like a work, but I hope nobody was seriously hurt from this.
Yeah. So Sting is then he just essentially knocks down Suzuki after escaping the choke, and it leads to Naito with the running jackknife cover and pins Suzuki. And then Jericho has the bat and goes after Naito. Sting stops Jericho with the bat as well. So obviously Jericho and Sting, this continues, and we'll talk about the press conference after, but this is going to lead to a follow-up on Wednesday in Hamilton with a tornado tag match with Jericho as his Painmaker character, teaming with Guevara against Sting and Darby Allin. So Sting is coming back in a couple of days after this with another match, which personally, listen, I didn't think this was one of the all-time big Sting matches that we've seen in this AEW run, but I do like when this guy gets like the big gap between matches, because I think he needs it.
Yeah, I think so too. At the same time, I guess you wonder if the layoff makes it tougher for him to constantly get back into shape. So maybe they just felt like, okay, Sting, you're in ring shape. Let's just have you do one more match.
He's certainly dialing back the whole retirement stuff at this point, like that. Like he made the comment about it, but like the initial like ideas of people thinking like this could lead to Wembley, you're certainly not getting that expectation.
He shut that down.
Yeah. So it seems like it sort of feels like when he was in TNA, where it was always a 1-year deal and then he'd be talked into continuing. And it seems like it's very similar now, where it's, Tony Khan wants to keep this guy going. And at the end of it, it's
Tony Khan is giving him the option to keep going. And when you leave the option to a wrestler about whether or not they should retire, more often than not, they're going to be delaying their retirement. And I think we're seeing within Steve Borden, it's probably really hard to walk away, especially when, like, I would say for the most part, his performances have been very welcome. They've been good. And he's getting these tremendous spots. Like, so I can understand why Sting wouldn't want to retire. I mean, in 2 months' time. Like he probably still feels like he has a whole lot left and he's not ready yet. Unfortunately, in these sort of cases, it might take a really bad performance for him to fully realize that, hey, I should probably step out of the spotlight. This was unfortunate. Maybe if he was supposed to get off of that table and did kind of affect things a little bit. But I thought there were still some very strong moments in the match, simply with the pairings between the legends. There's at one point where, like, I'm looking at this roster, or at least like this match itself, and seeing Sting in there with Tetsuya Naito and Chris Jericho and Minoru Suzuki, and I was like, "What? How did we get here? How did this happen? How did like wrestling put this into existence?" Like just the amount of like history and main events between those four alone, and you added Darby and Sammy Guevara as well. This was like a really strange, like, how did I get here type of like existential type of match. There was a lot of humor and personality between the heel team, Les Suzuki Gods. Somehow Minoru Suzuki fits in perfectly with
he
Chris
was
Jericho.
so good with Jericho this week. I would love to see more. Like, he would be great as sort of like Jericho's new heavy. You know what I mean? Like, if he was here for an extended run, like, I just thought they gelled so well together and just
I want to see skits. I want to see like these two just hanging out. I don't know what they're doing. Like, I hope Jericho took Minoru Suzuki out to I don't know, Queen West or where people, Yorkville, or I don't know where people party these days in Toronto. Richmond.
Suzuki would definitely hit up Yorkville, I think.
Yeah,
maybe more around TIFF season,
perhaps. Yeah.
The main event, it is Kazuchika Okada and Bryan Danielson. Awesome video just to set this up, and it's all built around who is the best. And we have the lights go down, and first it's Okada coming out to the Rainmaker theme, which made Danielson really angry, which he would explain later, like almost like a method actor in some ways, the way he described this, where he was explaining, like, he's in the back and he said like he was already in a bad mood about something going on that he wouldn't get into, non-wrestling related. But then he hears the Rainmaker theme and the money dropping and everyone going crazy for the gaudy look of Okada. And he put himself in his younger self, where he grew up poor. His dad never had money. And his dad's dream was to get to a white sandy beach, and he never could. And it's making him angry to come out to this match against this guy who's being celebrated for wealth and consumption. And to me, that is a level that I don't know how many performers get into that level of headspace for a match, as Danielson did here. That it was like a guy getting into character at the level of like a deep method actor.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure whatever you need to do to ramp it up and to add that extra little bit of aggression. I believe he actually came out first. So Danielson.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
because
I think the
well,
money
maybe then he was
after.
describing this in the ring. That
Yeah.
He said like this was what was going through his head during.
Yeah,
it must have been, because the way he explained in the press conference was then the music, his Europe theme hit, and then suddenly he was like brought into this other mood as well.
Okay, well, I don't exactly know like the order of his own emotions, but Bryan did come out first.
Okay, well, he came out to Europe. The final countdown.
Yeah,
Danielson said he has not listened to since 2009 when he left Ring of Honor.
One of the biggest reactions of the night, actually. You know, one of the moments of, I think, genuine shock from, you know, certainly me sitting with Ahmad and WH all looking at each other like, wow, like Tony Khan did it. I think at this point we kind of all know that it's a very expensive song. Tony has alluded to, you know, for them to purchase. And it's a one-time only thing, at least tonight.
But they do have the rights so that all the replays will have this on it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it made for an incredibly special moment, and one that I'm sure spoke to, you know, anybody who might have seen a bit of his ROH run. But even if you didn't, like, it's just like such a classic banger of a song, very much, you know, like, you know, here in Kansas for the Young Bucks. So a wonderful little moment that apparently costs as much as a wrestler's contract.
Yeah. This apparently did not come cheap. So they start, I mean, some of the highlights include Okada doing his dive over the rail, and he's going for the Rainmaker, but instead has to land a drop kick after missing with the Rainmaker. And Okada blocks a dive to the floor and tries a Rainmaker on the floor, which is ducked. And Danielson hits the Busaiku knee and then takes a tombstone by Okada on the ramp, throws him into the ring, and then comes off the top with an elbow drop. And apparently Danielson's arm was out. He said the arm was in an unsafe place. And that's where this injury occurs, where Danielson believes he broke his right forearm. And this was, you know, less than an hour after the match that he's describing this. So maybe
he's in a sling as well in the press.
Oh, it was all like the entire arm was in like a brace. And he's thinking that the early prognosis is this will be a 6 to 8 week injury for him. But again, like once he gets it fully checked out, we will see what the exact injury and timeline is going to be. But if you thought this was just phenomenal selling by Danielson, no, his right arm was completely compromised, and he had to think on the fly here. And he said one of the things, like, just he needed something, and thus he did the yes chant with the one arm that he could, because he needed to get the crowd into it. As you know, he didn't get into specifics, but it did affect the final 10 minutes of the match and changing things around. He was obviously going to go over, but how they got there was changed based off this injury and what he was limited to. So he stomps the head of Okada, does the yes chant, and then he's hit by a drop kick. Okada lands a Rainmaker, and Danielson kicks out at 2 and then moves to the label lock, and then hyperextends the arms into this the submission. And this totally caught this crowd by surprise when Okada taps. The first time he's tapped since 2015 in the G1 with Nakamura, and like this crowd exploded for this finish because of the uniqueness of Okada tapping and using a submission that I don't think people were naturally trained to expect. But I like the way the match ended with kind of the Danielson story of like where he would win the match in all these different ways that we saw last year. And then he has all these different tools at his expense. So not even realizing the injury, I thought this was an outstanding main event. This was my second match on the show. This and the 4-way I thought were comparable matches. But what did you think overall?
Well, first of all, like I was watching the match, noticing the arm sell, and I mean, this being Bryan Danielson, you just, you know, your first thought is, wow, this Bryan's doing a really good job selling his arm. But I also wondered, like, did I miss the spot where like Okada was specifically targeting the arm that led to this? I also like had somebody mention to me that it might have been the seizure cell that he was like,
yeah,
you know,
which he did midway through the match, and the trainer had to come in and check on him.
Like that somehow resulted in some sort of like arm paralysis. That would have made sense, I suppose, too, you know, from a Bryan Danielson type of like creative selling biological perspective. But it turned out to be a bit more just kind of practical and real than that. And I think that completely should recolor my opinion of the match. You know, that now becomes the story of the match. The fact that Bryan Danielson in the main event of one of the most, you know, stacked lineups in the history of, I would say, professional wrestling, had to basically improvise or at least wrestle the last 10 minutes of this match with a broken arm. I thought the finish was very surprising and in a great way because, you know, I first of all didn't expect Danielson to win. I think Okada is just so protected, especially going into, you know, the G1, that whereas Danielson has pretty much kind of lost a whole lot, that I expected Danielson to lose. So for that alone, I was surprised. The content of the match alone, I'll say, like, watching it, I don't know if it was maybe the length of time or the fact that it was trying to follow something like Omega versus Ospreay in terms of spectacle. I couldn't really get into a good chunk of the match, you know, until maybe closer to the end. And I think a part of that is just the Okada main event style as well. A bit of it is the Danielson main event style as well, where I think Okada is best paired with somebody spectacular like an Ospreay or like an Omega to kind of like really make some of those early moments special. Danielson is a much more methodical, you know, type of pro wrestler, and both of them are more like, you know, simmering types of wrestlers. And you can only imagine the run up to the finish that was originally planned between these two and how that was going to look. So I wasn't maybe as into this one as certainly, you know, Ospreay Omega, but, you know, maybe even not as much as like I was expecting myself. But I also think it's probably a match I would have enjoyed more maybe watching on commentary or watching on television and noticing a lot more of the subtleties. So again,
it's one I definitely want to rewatch. I enjoyed it quite a lot live. I thought it was a very different match from Ospreay and Omega, but I just thought like the story that they had of the, sort of like teasing the Rainmakers and Danielson sort of, you know, having to overcome this injury at the end that even in if you're watching it as sort of thinking it's a storyline injury, it's like he's still so good at coming up with, you know, interesting ideas. That the idea of Danielson going down the stretch without the use of his arm, you could totally see that in a Danielson playbook. And that's like, he has so much leeway that you suspect like something that's so out of the norm is completely normal for a Danielson match, that he would of course think about something like this, whereas I don't think too many people are thinking at like the level he is.
On some level, I think he might have appreciated the creative challenge of being put in that stressful situation on live television and having to come up with something satisfying with that handicap. He kind of alluded to it in the press conference where he said like he's, you know, he takes a lot of pride in, you know, sometimes situations like these where you're kind of, your back is pressed up against the wall and you have to, like, it's something to the effect of like, would you change anything about this match? And like, he kind of said like the injury, to something to the effect of like the injury kind of made this more special to him. And so that's just kind of the mind of Bryan Danielson.
So there you have it. That was Forbidden Door. After the show, Danielson did give a total babyface speech to the live crowd in Toronto, just thanking them for being such an awesome crowd for 5 hours. And, you know, stating this might be like the best crowd I've ever been in front of. And just thanking everybody. Like, it was just like, it was not Danielson as the leader of the BCC. This was just Bryan Danielson, who was, you know, very appreciative of this match. And again, we're watching this and not realizing like the extent of his arm injury. But I mean, he must have just been, you know, at the same point, you know, you're hurt and that can be a downer. But I think he was just coming off such a high of, I got through it, and probably a ton of adrenaline too, that, hey, we pulled it off. And think of the expectation of you, like, he watched Omega and Ospreay and knows what he's following and has to follow. And this was a guy that, you know, famously would be, as your ROH champion, he would sit down, he would watch the entire card before he would have to go out and follow some of those shows. And I mean, that tells you like the level of a veteran that he is, that, you know, in these 10 minutes, how many guys would have just panicked and gone to a finish, or it would have just been a jumbled mess. And here it was, okay, I'm in the main event of a pay-per-view. I don't have the use of my arm. I have 24 years of experience of wrestling in every situation possible. What do I have to work with without an arm?
Yeah. And I have the yes chant, which I'm sure he was very grateful for.
Yes, which it sounded like he begrudgingly leaned on. That is not in his repertoire these days. But excellent show. Just a tremendous, tremendous event to witness. And one of the, I think, contenders certainly for match of the year, which I think after January 4th, everyone thought was sewn up, but the two people who were responsible for that match are in competition with themselves. I think those are the 1-2 matches of the year so far. And we still have a lot to go this year. I mean,
we could get number 3.
We could get a third, and you've got a G1 coming up, and God knows what other else you have, but a total thumbs up show. And I think at the very sort of, if you're coming out of this in terms of just a understanding of where the industry is today. I think last year was a major lesson for people just in terms of, how niche is New Japan, how niche is like, all of the critiques that came into Forbidden Door last year. It overwhelmed people, I think, by how well it did. And this year, to me, it was that times many more. That this is like the state of the industry today. This is not pandering to a small minority of online fans. No, this is where the industry is these days. And this can fill a major arena that are up on all of your stories. And you're either up to speed with the state of the art, or you're behind the eight ball and not understanding what your audience is craving. And I spoke about this a little bit in the Q&A, but I do feel that one of the benefits that AEW has with a lot of like younger people in these positions from a Tony Khan on down is that you have people that are not far removed from being paying fans themselves, that know what appealed to them to spend money on a product. And in other companies, like, you have people that have been, not a blanket statement, but for a lot, it's people that have been in this their entire adult lives, that came up as fans in a totally different era. And experience can both benefit you in the sense that you have seen it all, you've done it all, but you also can get very entrenched in your ways of what works and what doesn't work. And this is an industry that is constantly changing, and something that didn't connect in one era can be completely different. And it has to be your job to be able to understand that this is a constant rotating sun, that it is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. And you want to just be able to be up to speed and the very best to kind of be slightly ahead to know what is coming too with the industry.
Certainly, yeah. I think, Tony Khan, for all of his faults, perhaps as somebody that, maybe is sometimes rightfully criticized for not letting a casual viewer in as much as he could with some of his television production styles. I think he also should be applauded for how much he caters to the hardcores. I mean, here's a billionaire son who I guess is a billionaire himself, that is willing to use all of his resources to cater towards fans that are used to having to go through really, really difficult means to just consume some of this stuff. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where, like, there was no Japanese commentary on a New Japan Pro Wrestling service, or there was no New Japan World at all. And now here's a guy who, decided to form a company very much based off of, I think, the type of style and success that New Japan bred, and now has included, so much of that of its roster into one of these main shows. And it's just completely showing that the hardcore fan base is completely massive. Not only can it sustain an entire company, but I don't even think we've really seen the limits yet. Even Wembley, look at that. Like, so this was a great show, absolutely. And I think it shows that this is a winning concept, and that the New Japan brand still has a lot of life left in it. Certainly the type of star power you have in an Okada and a Tanahashi, even in a Naito, in a Will Ospreay, those are still incredibly, like, big figures. And when you mix them with Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson and CM Punk, these are massive, sort of like dream level shows. So we'll see how they top it next year.
Yeah. Let's just quickly go over the press conference. I won't go into too much in it, but just going in order, the first guests were Sting and Darby Allin, and just talking a bit about Sting's longevity, the retirement question, and sort of just going like match by match at this point. And, he believed like there was a period a few years ago that he wasn't happy with his performances and where things were going. But I mean, I think generally, the sentiment has been very positive towards Sting in this AEW run as a whole. This was the setup for an angle where Jericho crashed the press conference, came in with the bat, and this leads to the Tornado tag match set up for Wednesday's Dynamite. Now, there was a really just an uncalled for issue where Jericho, who I'm sure was just like acting in the moment, but he took one of the water bottles and nailed it with his bat towards the members of the media and actually hit a guy in the face who was bleeding from this. And I just felt like, listen, I'm not a fan of running angles during these press conferences. That's my own preference, but I understand that they do use these press conferences as extensions of their shows at times. To me, there's no reason that, like, these media members, like, we are not performers. We are not taking part in angles. There should not be anyone that is leaving injured from attending a press conference. Like, there is, to me, I understand this is pro wrestling. There is a level of professionalism that I think needs to be exercised. And I was actually pretty upset during the press conference, seeing this happen. And I did check on the individual, and like, he appeared to be okay, but
he was taken away, right?
They did take him outside momentarily to be checked on for like 10 minutes or so. And then he came back, and I'm, out of respect to him, I'm not sharing his name because I don't know if he, anyway. The fact is, like, a guy was injured here, and it was just totally uncalled for. And it's just, that to me is where these press conferences, like, what are they? To me, like, this is like, you're shooting angles, and now it's like people are getting like injured here. They're just here to do their job. Okay. And that's, to me, I was very upset over this happening. And I hope it was a lesson for them that I don't expect.
Can you imagine if it was like a New York Times reporter?
I like, seriously, like, if this happened, it wouldn't happen elsewhere. And professional wrestling, it's like this weird area. And these press conferences are this weird amalgamation of content that AEW is producing and trying to be like a transparent dialogue with your members of the media. And I think it gets very tricky when you're trying to do this. And listen, I will sit through the in-character responses. I get it. I know what I'm attending, but to me, this is not what people are signing up for. And it's just totally needless. And I get it. Jericho's playing a heel. He's in the moment. I don't think he came in with this plan. But nonetheless, you put this performer as the performer in this situation. Like, it's, if you are ringside and you get struck, you somewhat understand that you are in the midst of the performance. You are in the crowd, and there is a chance that a dive that you could get struck, much like you could get hit by a foul ball at a Jays game. It is not expected that if you were at a press conference after a Jays game, that a player would come in and just go to town doing BP on the media. You know what I mean? It's just, I just thought this was ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it sounded ridiculous when you described it to me afterwards. Professional wrestling is a very strange thing, especially when you try to apply, I think, real journalistic standards to it. It's so weird. Like, it really, really is, and sometimes we're in the bubble, we don't realize it. But when you try to look at it through, the standards of a professional journalist going to one of these things, you realize just how inadequate it feels, how there's, even the discourse amongst its own performers, there's no real agreement about whether or not somebody should be speaking as themselves or speaking completely in character, as you got to see in this press conference, where felt very much Will Ospreay was completely out of character, but then it's followed up by somebody like a Tony Storm who's completely just kind of cutting promos. But beyond that, getting angles. Listen, like, I know that they're doing all of these kind of like for the audience, and the goal of professional wrestling is to create moments that are believable, even though they're fictitious. You're trying to create yourself story within like a real environment, and there's very few environments more real than a press conference with real journalists. So I understand the temptation to do something like that, but I also think they need a real check on what journalistic standards are and what professionalism is. And I think the wrestling media could really use that lesson too. I mean, a lot of us, even personally speaking, we don't necessarily come from like, journalistic training. And so a lot of this is just like fan media, where a lot of people are picking things up on their own. They don't exactly know that there are rules attached to whether or not you should be cheering in a media section or not. And I don't know if, AEW expects their journalists to live up to those standards either, and that thus you get these sort of weird amalgamations of both show and also press conference. No excuse though for I'm sure Jericho feels really bad too about, hurting. I don't know. I'm sure no excuse for getting somebody physically involved, especially in one of these press conferences though.
Beyond that, so Will Ospreay came out. He talked he really wants a match with Michi Marufuji. He mentioned hopes to be on the All-In card, but they reiterated he doesn't work for AEW. He works for New Japan. But you could certainly get the sense like he felt the pressure of this match and seemed like he came out of it and it was a win. Like they achieved what they set out to do and had one of the greatest matches that they could possibly have on this given night. Toni Storm was out, and it was that's you knew at Double or Nothing. Like, this is Toni Storm approaches this where she is fully in character, which I mean, it didn't prevent questions from still being thrown at her in character. But again, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea.
It's like in Japan, people stay in character for these things.
Bryan Danielson was excellent. I think he's great on all of these press conferences. I think in another role, he could host these things. I think he's just so well. He's just
he should be on the media calls instead of Tony. Probably.
He is great. I mean, the detriment would be I think he's too honest probably at times. So great for if you're covering this to get that level of honesty from an individual. But yeah, I asked him about the Tiger Driver 91 spot, and he certainly had his reservations about that, but understands like the divide that, I'd be a hypocrite here to criticize when I did a lot of things to get noticed. But, at this point, Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay are not trying to get noticed, but they are trying to deliver something that is going to be remembered forever. And this is an era where it's very hard to do things that are memorable, but it's that line again, that how close to the sun are we getting? And thankfully it didn't seem like there was anything drastic that came out of this, but you wouldn't be stunned either if like there was something awful that occurred when you're tempting fate to that degree to have that great match. And then Tony Khan, I mean, in his portion, it was about a half hour, and he spoke about a lot about Forbidden Door and just the lead up to this. It was their biggest gate. It would be the third highest gate in the history of pro wrestling in Canada, behind the 2 WrestleManias. And now the focus becomes on All In. He stated that, again, there's no hard brand split, so CM Punk could appear wherever. But, because I did ask him about like the Collision line that Punk used. If, he is advertised as now just for Collision dates, but Tony is obviously not, he's not cornering himself to state that he is just going to be on Collision. If they need him on Dynamite, they can put him on Dynamite, and they're not going to create a situation where they're violating something that they had stated. But did you get to see any of the press conference?
Yeah, I saw most of it. Yeah.
Was there anything that jumped out at you from any of the subjects?
I wasn't taking notes while I was watching it this morning over my cereal. But I thought it was, just pretty standard, typical. I don't think there was anything that we didn't already cover.
Well, on that note, you did throw out the call for anyone to join us if they would like to share their thoughts. So we have an individual that did join us at the Forbidden Pour.
Yeah, so look up in your patron mailboxes or post wrestling membership tabs on the YouTube side of things, and if you want to call in and get your thoughts in as well. But first, I actually want to go to a few super chats here that were sent to us live here at youtube.com/postwrestling, and we first go to Hernice De La Cruz, who sends $5. Thank you very much, and also for being a member here at our YouTube channel. He says 12 a.m. ending was a bit much, but by far the best pay-per-view I have ever seen. Hope you guys get some rest after tonight's show. Well, thank you. I'm very much looking forward to not doing any recording tomorrow. And that'll be, of course, after tonight's for Orlando Raw. Let's go up next to Killer Kurt 6, who sends $5. Thank you for the support, Killer Kurt. He says, I was in the building for DIY versus FTR and Omega versus Ospreay, 2 of the best matches in Scotiabank Arena history. Tonight's match was pro wrestling at its finest. Would you say the best match in Scotiabank Arena history?
Oh, Omega and Ospreay, yes. I with respect to DIY and Revival, I thought this would be a clear number 1.
We got a Jake from the Windy City. Thank you for the support as always, Jake. He says, this hasn't been talked about much, but do you see New Japan and AEW co-hosting an event in Japan itself soon? You'd figure New Japan Pro Wrestling would like something in return.
I think that with New Japan, I don't know if this was necessarily like this to me is it's a bigger show for the North American market than it is in Japan. And I think for maximum profitability, this should be a US or Canada based event rather than staging this at like a Budokan Hall or a Sumo Hall in Japan. I just think like they are not doing a $1 million gate in Japan for this this level of event that for New Japan. I think it's the ability that this is great for New Japan. Like they share in the success of this show. It is better promotion for them than anything that they're going to have through the access deal. And they also get New Japan talent funneled throughout the year over to get to go over there. So I think it's overall a relationship that's been very beneficial for both sides. But I would not be looking at Japan for the next Forbidden Door show. I would keep this in the US.
I get the sense the New Japan brand means more to an American audience than perhaps the AEW brand means to a Japanese audience, you know, and if there's a better way to perhaps use names like Bryan Danielson or John Moxley, it would be under a New Japan branded show, like a Dominion or you know, a Wrestle Kingdom, than to strictly promote something that's like a crossover show, like a Forbidden Door.
It would also drastically impact pay-per-view sales if it was airing live from Japan at a 3 a.m. time slot as well. Like this event has established itself. You could make the argument this is now, after 2 years, established itself as the biggest pay-per-view of the year for AEW. Like I think this is, if you want to pick out your one of all the pay-per-views, to me, it's like Forbidden Door is establishing itself as the big pay-per-view of the year for the company on a year that doesn't have an All-In like we have this year.
Yeah, which does surprise me, John. You know, just considering like half this roster is not on regular TV. Like we're just kind of like still coming off the star power from, I don't know, people's New Japan subscriptions, or maybe even a pre-AEW era where you hear a name like Okada, you hear a name like Naito, hear a name like Tanahashi, and there's still this special quality attached to all those names that doesn't require television time. So it's kind of remarkable.
And that was another note that Tony Khan did make, that at least the early indications, like this is ahead of Double or Nothing, and it's ahead of Forbidden Door from last year, which would mean topping 140,000 buys as well.
Wow. All right. One last super chat comes to us from Paul Dominic DeMarco. Thank you, Paul. He says, no destroyers tonight and Mox didn't bleed. Whoa.
You're right. Yeah, we did not see any of those representations on the show.
Wait till Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll bleed a gusher. He's got to save up that plasma for next week when he goes to Korakuen Hall for Desperado and the Jun Kasai tag when he's with Homicide.
That's it. Thank you guys for your super chats. Let's go up next to our calls. Hansi, it was nice to see you this weekend.
Yeah, man, it was really cool to see you guys, man. I had a really good time with I didn't think I'd get a Hansi chant, but it was pretty cool, man. I think I was the only one that asked a question about 90210 for some reason. Pollock suggested I ask a question. I go, okay, you know what? Everyone's gonna ask all these wrestling questions. I'm just gonna just throw a random one there. But I'm glad to see all you guys. I met everyone from the Post Wrestling family, like Phil. I didn't know how tall Bruce Lord was. Holy crap, man! It was amazing, and I met Brandon finally. It was good, man. I really enjoyed that you guys had the event, man.
It was nice to see you, and I think it was nice for the audience to be able to see you as well.
Yeah, for sure, man. As far as the show goes, man, I thought probably I haven't been to like every single. I know you guys have been to like all these manias and all that kind of stuff, right? So I haven't been to like any manias, but I think this may have been like the best wrestling pay-per-view show that I've been to. And the thing is, it does get exhausting. I was only hoping for like one match in the 0 hour, but like it just everything, because by the time the night was done, I was like already like almost passed out. But like I can't say that like I regret anything, because Ospreay and Omega was probably obviously the match of the night. Even though I knew Bryan and Okada wasn't gonna match it, like I thought it was gonna be a second best match. But I can't believe I was actually in the building for the final countdown, because I've been waiting for that for so long. And when it came out, man, I was like singing along all the time. You know what I mean? But I thought it was really good. The main thing that I'm looking forward to from from the show are the Jungle Boy follow up. I thought that was a good angle. I didn't really think the match was that great, but I really do hope. I really do hope that Kingston and Mox do get because again, like their first feud in the AEW was really good. The only downside about that it was during the pandemic where there was like no crowd reaction, but their promos were really really good. And now that those crowds back, and these guys could probably do a compelling angle with their feud because they'll be like the crowd will be invested into it. So I'm really looking forward to that. So a lot of things that I'm looking forward to afterwards between like maybe and before I go, do you guys if they do Bryan versus Okada again, because that looks like it's building for like a potential part 2. Do you guys think that happens at All In, or do you guys think they'll save that for Wrestle Kingdom? And I'll take your comment off the air. But again, guys, thanks for the good weekend. You made my my life more enjoyable. So I praise you guys and all the success to you guys in the world. Peace out.
Thanks, Hansi.
Thank you, Hansi. Bryan
I don't
Okada.
see that being the all-in match. My thought. I'm definitely not throwing out the possibility of this Nigel match because there was a spot in the press conference where one of the people asking the questions was about there being. It was something about like there are some great British wrestlers in AEW, and you had Danielson with the response like who, and you thought he was getting set up for like he thought that the person was going to refer to Nigel as one of them because if you remember the last press conference, like he just so dismissed it in a way that felt like they are building towards something that again I could see that being a possibility and with Nigel coming out of retirement for that. I love the idea of Danielson and Okada. If you're going to do the rematch, which given the nature of the submission, I think you have Okada wanting that rematch. That could be a Wrestle Kingdom match. I could see, for sure. That would be where I would aim for that rather than All In.
Makes sense to me. That it would be something like that. Or just another New Japan big show. All In doesn't necessarily feel like it. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I would think that New Japan would probably want that one on home solo for that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Hansi, for the call. Let's go to 2 more calls, and we ask our remaining callers to maybe be respectful for time as we are past the 2-hour mark on the show. Let's go up next to Andy B. How's it going?
Guys, I just wanted to quickly make a comment on this show. I thought Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay might have been the best match I've ever seen. A little bit of recency bias. I don't expect to see anything that good for a long time. But I didn't think this show was as good as last year's. I thought last year's Forbidden Door was my show of the year. I don't think we got to those standards just this year because I really enjoyed the BCC Elite match and Ospreay Omega, but I thought everything else was a little bit up and down. So for me, Mania Night 1 still my show of the year. What did you guys think?
Hard to judge directly right now. I mean, I'm the type that has to be reminded of what exactly happened, at Mania 1 and how I felt in those particular moments. I think those are probably the top 2 contenders though right now for a lot of people between shows of the year. Certainly the spectacle of Mania is hard to contend with, but man, in ring.
Wrestle Kingdom would be in there. I thought Revolution was an excellent show this year. Like you do have some really solid contenders. This one would be in the mix. I don't know if this is your slam dunk for show of the year. I think it certainly the match of the year. I could certainly see going to this show. But even that, I think between the 2 Ospreay Omega matches, you're going to have that debate.
Yeah. And guys, I wanted to quickly throw this question at you. So we're almost at the halfway point of the year. And and we've got AEW getting on a roll now with CM Punk coming back, and you guys were discussing that there's something he's indicating that this could be his final big contribution to the company, at least on a full-time basis. Do you think him putting over MJF should be like some sort of grand gesture wherein it's like an ultimate passing of the torch and him sort of like riding off into the sunset for some time, or do you think it's a match they get to the next 4 or 5 months?
Thanks, Andy.
I think it's something that they could like to me, not knowing all the directions of where they're going. To me, if I'm coming back with All Out in Chicago at the United Center, it's Punk going for the title. I don't see a stipulation like it's like title versus career. But you certainly have to look at Punk. Like what is his short and long-term goals when it comes to pro wrestling. Like, I could see this being something where, like, does he have another contract in him that he is looking at, or is he looking at finishing up his time, which again, we don't even know how much time is on his deal now and how the last 9-10 months affect that length on his deal that he had signed in 2021. But yeah, like, certainly he has never explicitly stated that, but you certainly did get the vibe of going in, like with the ESPN interview, that, you know, I still have work to be done. And the fact that he did have thoughts over these last 10 months of whether he comes back or not. So you could certainly see, but again, like the Sting example, once you start to really see that end of the line, perhaps you're not so sure once you get close to that being a reality. And if your body's holding up, you want to keep going. That's how these performers are going to think. As long as I'm performing at a level I'm happy with, why would I end that? And Punk, it's remains to be seen. But I would think that MJF match would be something you want to get to sooner rather than later. I think that would be an ideal match for Chicago Labor Day weekend.
You want it for the championship, and how long is this MJF title reign going to last? You know?
Yeah. You would think, like, for the payoff, it's going down to the wire about the end of this year and whether he stays or takes the title, and the title being like held hostage by MJF. Although they certainly are not pushing that as hard, nor do they have to at this point of the year.
Let's go up next to Mr. Kane. Hey, Mr. Kane.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good.
We're good.
Well, just to make it really short here, it's an incredible pay-per-view. It was incredible from top to bottom. I really liked that MJF Tanahashi match. I think, especially that rope break with the Bryce rope break, that was made me pop out loud. I was laughing. I really came out of seeing that Danielson and Okada match. I was worried. I was really worried that you know, he was seriously, like, you know, seriously in a bad way. And I know some people found it in poor taste at the end of the day, when, you know, especially with this media scrum, seeing them all in great spirits. It really helped. It really helped me feel, you know, reassured that, okay, sometimes we're gonna have these ruses, we're gonna have these moments. And I know it's you're really playing too close to the fire there, but end of the day, it is pro wrestling. And about that scrum, I think, I know there's not a lot of newsworthy stuff coming out of there, but that's the kind of stuff I wanted to see when it comes from a scrum, especially from Ospreay and Danielson. Man, their genuine feelings towards their performance and how they conducted themselves in the ring and the come down and just the thought behind it. That's more insightful to me than, you know, and I would like to see more of that. It's
a different
whatever
dimension to the individuals. Like, I think Toni Storm could get so much more out of approaching, and I'm not trying to single her out either. Like, there's plenty of examples that I think like Danielson is technically a heel on television, but he doesn't have to play this persona. And to me, it gives a depth. It's an understanding of, okay, we're all on the same page here. I play this performer, but these are my real thoughts about the performance I just put on, that I just think in the long term, it endears you to your audience. It gives you a greater respect for what you have just seen. And I think more performers could take advantage of this versus a straight line of consistency from what you saw on screen. And this press conference is merely an extension of that I'm not getting any more depth than what I could get on a Wednesday or Saturday night from that performer. So I think it's incumbent on the performers to understand there's a value for themselves in these kinds of media situations as well, that some are not going to be as comfortable doing, but I think there's great value to it.
Thank you for the call, Mr. Kane. Let's go to one last super chat from Rory, who says, guys, the FOMO was real looking at both the Forbidden Pour and Door. An incredible night of amazing matches and huge buzz. Albeit all in, let's go. Oh, wow. That's a long trip, it sounds like, for you, Rory, from Australia. So enjoy that. And thank you for the kind super chat. Let's go to a few pieces of feedback. We are running very late, so we're only going to get to about maybe 3 people. So, but if you want to read everybody's thoughts, go to forum.postwrestling.com, where we have our feedback thread to Forbidden Door. Do you want to start us off, John?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Andrew from Fort Erie. He says it was a fun weekend going solo to watch wrestling in Toronto. Collision was fun, and the crowd helped, especially for Punk. Same thing for Forbidden Door, except the show was too long. My match of the night was Omega and Ospreay. The main event was good, but there were some parts that I felt I was dozing off for a bit and didn't expect the finish to be a tap out from Okada. Thanks for a fun get-together with the community for Forbidden Pour. I couldn't come for the post-show due to work the next day. Yeah, this was one, again, I think that the 0 hour is sort of it's a voluntary hour that I don't necessarily tack onto this. There have been times when you feel the length of a show. This was not one of those cases for me, at least being in the building, and especially that final stretch. Like, if you came for those big 2 matches, I thought they delivered and then some. And I mean, throughout the show, like you had several like outstanding matches to keep things moving. I don't have as much of an issue where it's like an 8 o'clock till midnight pay-per-view level. I think 3 hours, you're not doing that show in 3 hours without cutting down a lot. And I think people would have felt you wouldn't want to compromise that Omega Ospreay match, or even Danielson Okada either.
Let's go to Eric from Cork, Ireland, who says, good show overall, though not as good as the live Ask Away yesterday. All right.
Well, we'll take the compliment.
Did we over deliver on did we do better than Okada versus or Omega versus Ospreay?
Did we have our version of
I think we did. Main event, Punk and the 10 men were all very good, with most of the rest of the card decent. Sting tag was probably the worst match on this run, which is to be expected considering half the people in it are old, and Naito was putting in 0 effort. I wouldn't say that. He did have his shirt on, but I would not say 0 effort. I thought it was a good Naito effort. Ospreay Omega was bad, far worse than their first match. Far too long and overindulgent, with both reverting back to their worst tendencies. Ospreay as a heel always refuses to let the babyface look cooler than him, and is going to do his cool moves knowing that he's going to get cheered for it, which results in a mess of the match. If you want to be cheered, just work a double babyface match.
Okay, we're going to go to one more. Let's go to Jordan from the Bronx. An incredible show. Kenny and Will was match of the night and surpassed their Wrestle Kingdom match, in my opinion. Hopefully the rubber match happens at Wembley. I'm only disappointed that Callis' security wasn't the Truth Commission. I didn't like Sting trying to take all of the Sammy stuff. I felt uncomfortable at times. Danielson and Okada was art. Fake seizure aside, tapping out Okada with an improvised submission was the last thing anyone would predict. Eddie Kingston's storytelling in this match is why he's one of the best in the business, and the rest of the card was a lot of fun. Forbidden Door is a can't-miss show. Hopefully next year there's some integration with Stardom to help boost the women's presence on the show. Yes, Stardom did have a pay-per-view on Sunday as well, so that always was going to be an issue that was going to prevent that from occurring. But given the advancements with Julia, I think that certainly there is a groundswell of demand to see Stardom integration with AEW in the future, and I'm sure that it is something that they will address with the amount of comments that you see going in and coming out of this show when it comes to that as well. And Julia, to me, would be probably at the top of your list of the talent that you would want to export. And I kind of like the idea of one representative coming over at the beginning as opposed to just a whole slew of talent. Like, you can do that in the future when you have the right show set up and the right sort of architecture for a show. But Julia just coming in as your one representative to start, I think that's the way to begin things. And it looks like they're going to get the ball rolling on that with Willow.
I also don't think it needs to be kept to Forbidden Door for something like that to happen.
No, this can satisfy other parts of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, on that note, we have surpassed the 2-hour mark. Thanks to everyone that joined us here for a special Monday afternoon edition of the show. Yes, we are back tonight for Rewind of Raw. We will be live at 11 Eastern, so join us then. We'll catch up on any news that's going on and then get into Raw from Savannah, Georgia. So again, a big thank you to anyone that we got to see over the weekend at the Forbidden Pour. A big thank you to all of you and for tuning in today as well. So, Wei and I are going to get some rest and then come back for 3 more hours of wrestling tonight.
Join us if you enjoyed these reviews by supporting at postwrestlingcafe.com or video.postwrestling.com. For the next several weeks, we're going to have at least 4 shows a week in a row. So those of you that only listen to us Mondays or Wednesdays, you can get us pretty much every single other day of the week by signing up at postwrestlingcafe.com, where we have our MCU later reviews of Secret Invasion coming out. We have our Dark Side of the Ring reviews after Rewind of Dynamite, Rewind of SmackDown on Fridays, Rewind AEW Collision Course with Kate and Sino every Saturday/Sunday now, and soon to come the G1 as well. So Lots of great stuff over at postwrestlingcafe.com.
Yes, it is the support that keeps Post Wrestling running. Postwrestlingcafe.com, video.postwrestling.com. You can sign up now and you get a whole month to check out everything, 4 shows per week for the foreseeable future on the cafe. So thanks to everyone for joining us, and we will speak with you tonight.